In this video, we uncover the shocking story of a young woman who thought she had found love, only to discover too late the dangerous truth. At around 7:80 p.m. on December 2, 2010, in Melbourne, Australia, a maintenance worker went to the garbage room in the service area of a private high-rise on St Kilda Road. The door wouldn't open when he tried to open it. It looked like something was stopping it from the inside. He finally got it to open a little after a few failed tries. He called the building caretaker because he was worried. They went back together and looked at the access logs. There wasn't much light in the room, so the equipment that had been moved around cast long shadows on it. The floor had marks that didn't match up. There was something wrong with the way things looked. The hatch next to the garbage chute looked like it wasn't held in place properly. At the doorway to the room, they saw broken glass and a weak, smeared footprint. They didn't go inside. They instead left the door slightly open, wrote down the time, and told the building manager and emergency services what was going on. Soon after, it became harder to get to the floor. The lift was put into service mode and security guards shut off the hallway. People living upstairs went about their evening tasks as usual, not realizing that something very troubling had just been found under their feet. 2 employees waited for the cops to arrive in silence. Phoebe Hansjuk was born on May 9, 1986. She had a vivid mind from a very young age. She used her imagination to make her own places. She stood out because she was nice and friendly. She kept busy, played basketball, and loved playing games outside. The ocean was her safe place. She felt calm in the outdoors and loved spending time with her friends outside. Phoebe seemed happy on the outside, but she was really quite vulnerable. During her teenage years, she had bad moods and tried drugs that were against the law. She later drank to calm down because she was stressed. Because of these problems, she sought professional help, went to therapy, and was finally given medication to help her find balance. Phoebe was a mix of happy and worried at the same time. She was always happy and at the party, so she could be the life of the show. But when she was alone, she would focus on herself. She was a rock in friendship. She was loyal, kind, and reliable. At home, she was kind and protective, especially of her brothers, who felt safe enough to tell her anything. Phoebe had a job as a front desk manager at a salon by the time she was 23. She was good at the part. She liked having things in order, was good at her job, and got along with most people. She spent a lot of time on art when she wasn't working. It helped her deal with her feelings and understand the world. Phoebe didn't think things were the most important things in life. There were connections, memories, and moments that were shared. What Phoebe wanted to do with her life was clear. She was set to go on a trip abroad and do volunteer work in India. It wasn't about seeing things. It was about making a difference, finding purpose, and getting experience in the real world. She actively looked into possibilities, planned her route, and was getting ready to go for it. In school, Phoebe wasn't known for being flashy or popular. Instead, she was known for being dependable and able to bring people together. Her strength came from inside her. Her grandmother was one of her best friends and someone she could talk to about anything, what her hopes and fears were, as well as the treatments she was getting. Her grandmother always heard without judging and was there for her no matter what. In Phoebe's life, there was a delicate balance between her outward energy and her deep inner battle. She really knew how to connect with people, but behind that smile was someone who was struggling to stay grounded. The fight she was having with herself affected both her friendships and her need for mental support when things got tough. As a front desk manager at a salon in 2009, Phoebe met Anthony Hampel, an events organizer who was 39 years old. His family was well known in Melbourne. Judge George Hampel used to work for the Supreme Court and retired. Felicity Hampel, his stepmother, was a judge on the county court. Anthony hung out with powerful people, made links, and was known for carefully managing his public image. She moved in with him that autumn. At the Balancia Apartments on St Kilda Road, a high-end building with more than 80 units, a gym, a pool, a sauna, a spa, and a restaurant. The building was manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was the best real estate going. The apartments in the building were worth up to $1.5 million each. Their flat was on the 12th floor and had a huge view of the parks in the city. Antony's life was made up of business events, networking dinners, and always talking to important people. It was all about rank, polish, and performance in his world. Phoebe, on the other hand, liked things that were simple: art, nature, and spending time with friends. As they got used to living together, that difference became clearer. At first, they were attracted to each other and interested in each other. Antony led her into his world, but it was one that was shaped by his taste. Things started to change over time. He started to talk about her clothes, told her not to hang out with certain people, and expected her to fit in with his high-class friends. Phoebe felt the stress and told people close to her what was going on. Her family and mental health workers said that the emotional stress was getting worse. As Phoebe put it, she felt verbally pushed around like her choices were being questioned or directed. She said a lot of times that she wanted help, not limits, and she was eager to keep her freedom. In the beginning, there was peace and harmony, but soon there were rising emotions and fights. Phoebe's family knew every time she talked about wanting to leave. The therapist did the same. One day, her grandma told her in a soft voice that if she really wanted to leave, she should do it her own way. Phoebe tried to stay away from Antony's world. Once she got back to working on her own projects, she tried to set limits, but the changes she made never stayed. Antony's close friends and the controlled environment in their apartment gave her the impression that things were stable, but it only made her feel more dependent on him. The connection interested Antony's family a lot. They even brought up the idea of making it official. But Phoebe's family were against it, that Phoebe had the freedom to choose for herself, to choose who to trust and how to live her life was important to her. Phoebe had a video call with her mom at the end of November. Antony's mom was shocked to see her daughter still at his flat because she knew Phoebe was getting ready to leave. When she asked how things were between them, Phoebe moved her hand to remain quiet and dodged the question by saying they were in the other room watching a movie. They had dinner with Matt and Julia Rockman the next night. During the meal, Phoebe tried to talk to Julia about the problems in their relationship, but Antony cut her off and changed the subject. A big fight broke out in the underground parking lot after dinner. Phoebe got up and called an old friend, clearly upset, to ask to meet up for drink. One of their friends said that they had a nice time for an hour at a pub. Phoebe's phone kept ringing during that time. In less than an hour, Antony called her 27 times. Phoebe threw her iPhone across the street without thinking because she was so stressed. Phoebe went to her mom's house later that night. A long, important talk took place. The goal of this talk wasn't to fix the relationship. It was about how to get out of there safely and without more trouble. The next morning, Phoebe went back to the flat she shared with Antony, as shown by her phone records. After that, there were several calls for help. She called Alfred Hospital's crisis team, her doctor and her therapist. During her 30-minute interview with the therapist, she told him about her drug use and how things were getting worse at home. It wasn't just a temper tantrum. She was eagerly looking for advice on how to stay sober and stop things from getting worse. Through building entry logs, surveillance footage, and Antony's own words, the events of December 2, 2010 were put together. He said he left the flat around 8 a.m. Phoebe was still asleep. Phoebe's computer sent an email at 8:45 a.m. For the next hour, short bursts of user action were kept track of. There was a fire warning at 11:43 a.m. Phoebe and her dog were seen leaving the building calmly by security cameras in the lobby and halls. No signs of stress or hurry. It turned out that the warning was not real. There was not a planned drill, and there was no public evacuation that followed. Phoebe went back through the main door at 11:50 a.m. and took the lift back up to her floor. That was the last time that day that she was seen on security video. When Antony got home around 6 p.m., he saw that something wasn't right. There were pieces of broken glass near the desk, most likely from something on the desk that had been dropped. There were small spots of blood on the keyboard and other surfaces nearby, such as on the mouse pad. A torn pillowcase was lying on the couch. The front door didn't look like it had been broken into. Phoebe's bag, wallet and keys were found in the kitchen, but her phone was not. There were 2 used wine glasses on the table, but there were no signs that a meal was being made. Not a single plate, fork or knife is set out for dinner. There were faint lines on the floor in the hallway and living room that went from the desk area to the front door of the apartment. It was not possible to find out where these marks came from. A big shoe print was seen near the front door. It was bigger than the prints that maintenance or cleaning staff usually make. Phoebe's dad tried to call her iPhone at 6:51 p.m., but the call went to voicemail. The next minute, at 6:52 p.m., Anthony called her dad to say he didn't know where Phoebe was and that her phone was missing from the flat. He kept in touch with friends and co-workers and ordered food for one person at the same time. Someone living nearby was told by the food delivery driver at 8:10 p.m. that cops were nearby in the service corridor. Anthony then went downstairs to talk to police and told them that Phoebe was lost and he hadn't been able to reach her. He hadn't called the police or made a missing persons report until that moment. A deep, narrow chute ran from the top floors of the building to a repair area in the basement. This was how the trash got picked up. It stood about 130 feet tall and Anthony and Phoebe lived on the 12th floor. A heavy metal hatch with an automatic closing device and a small opening was built into the chute. There were bins at the bottom that held the trash. Phoebe fell down this slide. It was a terrible fall. On her way down, she hit the metal walls and then landed in one of the bins. The effect hurt people very badly. Her hips and legs were broken and one of her feet was almost cut off. The force of the fall caused a lot of blood inside the body. Medical records showed that vital signs were still present at the time of impact, even though the person had been hurt. Phoebe stuck her head near one of the big trash cans after she fell. Even though she was badly hurt, she was able to get out of the container and land on the hard floor of the garbage room. Blood on the floor showed that she was trying to move and get her bearings. She was badly hurt and had lost a lot of blood, so she couldn't stand. The marks on her body showed that she had to change positions many times as she tried to get to the door. It was very dark in the room. The light switch had to be turned on by hand and there were no windows. As Phoebe moved slowly forward in the dark, she only had her sense of touch to help her. She finally lost her strength and the trail came to an end. There was a pool of blood under her and her hands were still there, showing that she was still aware and fighting to stay alive until the very end. The medical expert found that Phoebe didn't die right away. After being hurt, she was still alive and conscious for a while. She finally died because she had lost so much blood. The injuries, broken bones, torn blood vessels and internal damage made it impossible for her to live for a long time. But her body was fighting to stay alive. During the probe, one disturbing fact stood out. Phoebe was found with her jeans pulled down to her knees. This didn't make sense for a normal autumn, where clothes would normally stay in place. During the investigation, this strange thing was never properly explained. In her last moments, she was completely alone. It was very hard for sounds to get through in the trash room, so she couldn't have screamed or called for help. No one in the area said they heard any strange noises. For the most part, Phoebe was stuck in the dark with no way to get help. When police came, they quickly decided that the verdict was clear and stopped the paramedics from getting close to the body. Because of this choice, medical staff couldn't find out the exact time of death or how long Phoebe might have lived after the fall. The first police officers who arrived almost right away thought it was a case of self-harm. During those early hours, no neighbors were asked to be interviewed. Not all of the security footage was gathered and the building's CCTV system wasn't turned off, even though it did that every 48 hours. Someone on staff even suggested keeping the hard drive. But it wasn't taken seriously. Later, the hard drive and any data that might have shown Phoebe's last moves were never found. Important investigation steps were skipped inside the flat. The used wine glasses were not gathered or looked at. Not a single fingerprint was taken. The blood spots were not looked at. The blood splotch pattern wasn't properly recorded, and no effort was made to find out where the broken glass came from. There was a big shoe print near the front door that wasn't taken or written down. Trace proof wasn't looked for in the door frames and windows. Some important electronics like laptops and a desktop computer were never seized. They were still open and safe to get to. Anthony's devices were also not taken away, but Phoebe's phone was never found. Because of this, important digital files like activity logs, sketches and notes that weren't saved were lost. That evening, there were only light checks on who could enter the building. In theory, you needed an entry fob to get in, but if you were with a resident, you could get around security without leaving a digital trail. The police never tried to figure out what Anthony's possible visitors did that night. They didn't get full guest entry logs from the front desk or compare them with data from the lifts or keycards. The staff found it possible for some guests to get in without leaving any evidence. The service area was locked down, but the flat itself was never really locked down so that a forensic probe could be done. Anthony kept moving around easily, talking on the phone and accepting packages. This caused more pollution to enter the surroundings. It messed up microscopic data, which made any later reconstruction less reliable. Officers didn't write down how his clothes and shoes looked when they arrived, and they didn't get any control samples to match with the footprints that couldn't be identified that were found in the flat. The idea of self-harm was put forward surprisingly quickly. Within a few hours, official comments started to lean more and more towards this view. The case files didn't make it clear why the decision was reached so quickly. Even though there was no note, proof of planning, or evidence of purpose, the case was quickly put into a category. By the end of the first week, agents didn't have a clear picture of who did what or where they went. Even though there wasn't any solid proof, the idea that Phoebe climbed into the chute on her own had become widely believed. All future findings would be based on that assumption, which would make it very hard to look at the case again later. The formal report called it a terrible accident caused by alcohol. The lab report for Phoebe showed that her blood alcohol level was about 0.168%, about 3 times the limit that is allowed to drive in most states, plus traces of 1 or 2 sleep aid. She was thought to have cut herself on glass in the flat, gotten lost, picked up a trash bag, opened the chute hatch, and then found herself inside. However, Phoebe's family and outside experts did not agree with that account. First, that idea had a lot of problems with how the chute hatch was made. The opening was only about 8 inches wide, there were no handles, and it closed itself. Even people who tried to copy the movement while being watched had a hard time and needed help. Second, Phoebe's injuries were more consistent with falling with her arms at her sides instead of raised above her head, which is what would happen if she had jumped in on purpose. Also, Phoebe's fingerprints were not found on the chute hatch or any of the surfaces nearby. This is a big problem for the idea that she climbed in by herself. It was also proven that she hadn't taken out the trash that day, which made the idea that she fell in while throwing away trash even less likely. These are important points that make the official version look bad. One thing that really bothered me was where Phoebe's clothes were placed. When a person goes down a tight vertical shaft by themselves, their clothes usually stay in place or get caught around their hip. But when reenactments were done by outside experts, a different story came out. A limp body can get stuck in the jeans if 2 people force the lid open and push the body through the hatch. This makes it easier to push the body downward because the legs can't move. The result was the same as what was found with Phoebe. Phoebe's elbows and wrists had linear bruises on them. The police think they happened because they hit the walls of the chute while they were falling. But outside, experts hired by Phoebe's family thought these marks were consistent with a strong grip. In spite of this idea was never fully tested by looking at different grip positions or defensive patterns. The official answer about alcohol and sleep aids didn't make sense when you thought about how to get to the chute on your own. In that state where coordination and motor skills would have been greatly weakened, it would have been very hard to open and close a spring-loaded hatch and get inside. Experts from different fields agreed that doing those things in that order would be very hard to do in that state. The forensic evidence showed that there were no handprints or grip marks on the inside edge of the door or on the wall near the entrance. These are the kinds of places where someone climbing in alone would need to brace themselves. Also, the angle of the first impact, which could be seen from Phoebe's injuries, did not match the body position needed for self-entry with arms raised overhead. The broken glass may have caused the blood in the flat, but it didn't explain why there were no prints of her on the hatch mechanism to support the idea that the person fell and hit their head. Forensic pathologists looked at toxicology and the lack of common signs of fight like skin under the nails or torn hair from an attacker. Some people said that because the first investigation was flawed and some areas' prints and samples were not checked or gathered, it was impossible to be sure that there was no violent scenario. It was also very hard to figure out when the person died. Because of the situation and the delay in medical help, experts weren't able to exactly match biological signs to a real date. When someone dies can be very important for ruling out or confirming different stories of what happened. But that important window was closed for Phoebe. Anthony did some strange things in the hours and days after the event that stood out and not in a good way. Officer Justin O'Brien noticed that Anthony's sadness wasn't showing up in the physical ways that people usually show when they're crying. There were no tears, red eyes, or signs of a runny nose that could be seen. Anthony insisted on typing his own statement because he could do it quickly when it was time to give one. While this was going on, his mood swings stopped completely. He looked focused, calm, and in control. At the same time, someone in his social group told police about another online contradiction. Anthony acted like everything was fine, but when people came to see him, he would become clearly sad, almost as if he was changing how he felt to fit the crowd. When Phoebe's grandmother saw the flat, she thought it looked like it had been staged. Almost all of Phoebe's things were gone, and the only things that could be seen were a few carefully placed photos of the pair and for her family. It seemed like they were trying to show a curated version of their bond. Some of Phoebe's friends said they felt pushed too. Ellie was one of them. Anthony sent her an email asking her to confirm that his relationship with Phoebe was loving and to tell other people about it. Ellie said no, stating that she couldn't speak for Phoebe and that the claims were not true. At about the same time, Phoebe's coworker, Christo, started showing up more and more often at the building's front desk. He brought snacks over a lot of times and kept pushing the idea that Phoebe had been depressed so badly that she couldn't be helped. The visits went on for about 2 weeks. After the fact, some staff members said it felt like someone was trying to change how they saw what had happened. People were also interested in Anthony's personal life when he wasn't with Phoebe. He said that one of his coworkers was only professional, but pictures and messages from that person suggested a closer relationship. No one in Phoebe's group thought this was morally wrong. They saw it more as a possible distraction that could have made him less focused or changed how he behaved during fights and times when he wasn't with Phoebe. Anthony had a network of important family members, business partners, and close friends around him. Together, they were like a shield around him, giving him legal advice, sharing a story that helped him, and trying to stop people from asking uncomfortable questions. Phoebe's family and friends thought it was a planned attempt to control the story and stop other possible answers from coming up. Because there was a clear imbalance of power and resources, any follow-up probe was skewed in a way that helped Anthony. This made it a lot harder to question the first results or ask for a more thorough investigation of the case. But Fu's dad and grandfather didn't keep quiet. Right away, they got involved in looking for answers. Indeed, her grandfather put the trash chute through a number of physical tests. The results were put together in an official report that was sent straight to the coroner. At the same time, Phoebe's parents wanted the flat to be searched for evidence again. Their request was turned down. Authorities pointed to choices made during earlier investigations and said that any later investigation would probably be harmed by contamination. The family put their concerns in writing and asked higher-ups in the department to look again at the original response and the amount of evidence gathered. Their work was still only about following the rules. They put in motions asking for more forensic analysis, petitions to keep digital evidence safe, and official inquiries into the security and maintenance services of the building. The family made a timeline of events and gave it to the police, asking that it be looked at along with other ideas. They also did things to make people more aware, like telling people about important holes in the investigation, pushing for meetings with department heads, and asking that some investigative processes be looked at again. Form letter responses, on the other hand, told them that the first question was enough and pointed back to the first explanation, which was an accidental death linked to impairment. The case file for Phoebe's parents and grandpa was very long. By the time it got to the coroner's court, it had the results of independent shoot tests, conversations with the property management company, letters from the police, proof of attempts to get into digital accounts, and a growing list of evidence that was missing or thought to be lost. Their main point was easy to understand. We didn't finish the case, so it shouldn't be closed, not when there are so many mistakes, omissions, and questions that remain unexplained. The hearing by the coroner was the family's last chance to get official proof that Phu's death was not just a sad accident. Judge Peter White looked over the information for several months and talked to experts, police, lawyers, and the family. He had to answer a very important question. What really happened in December 2010? Did they hurt themselves? Was it a mistake or was it something illegal? The official forensic doctor stuck to the story that the person died after drinking and taking sleeping pills together. That decision worked out well for both the police and Antony's family. Gave a simple explanation that didn't need to be checked out for possible third-party participation. Phu's family gave their own counter-arguments, which included results from acting out the shoot situation. Deborah Simensma, their lawyer, said that the physical proof pointed to outside interference, but the judge didn't believe her. He admitted that the first investigation had major flaws, but said that those flaws didn't change the main result. He thought that Phoebe's death was an awful mistake and not something that was done on purpose. The case was over after that decision. There was no new criminal probe. Turned out badly for the family in other ways. Most importantly, it stopped them from asking for help from other countries to get back digital data. In the US, for example, Gmail information couldn't be made public because law enforcement hadn't found a crime. Years later, when Phoebe's family finally got some access to her email accounts, they found something very annoying. A number of texts had already been deleted for good. Antony didn't wait long to do something. When Phoebe died, he asked her retirement fund to pay him a death benefit because they had been living together as a domestic partnership. His father, George Hampel, who is a former judge from the Supreme Court of Victoria, swore that the relationship had lasted longer than it actually did to back up the claim. Antony got about $113,000 in the end. Even though Phu's family strongly objected, Antony sent the money to her brothers. But that act didn't do much to make things better between the families. Family and friends of Phoebe didn't feel better after the coroner's decision. Something they had long thought was true was proven to them. The truth was lost under legal terms and the Hampel family's power. After the court case was over, there was another argument over who should decide what to do with Phoebe's body. Antony refused to identify her body himself, so her parents had to deal with that terrible burden. Felicity Hampel, Antony's stepmother and a county court judge, told Phoebe's mother that Antony should be her next of kin. The family was shocked by what was said. There was a way to keep them from making decisions about what would happen to their daughter. What happened next was painful and deeply meaningful. It wasn't just one goodbye, there were two. Fu's folks held a service by the river at a building that used to be a monastery. Family and friends who had known her for a long time got together to talk about her life, school, and hopes and dreams. It was quiet, moved people deeply, and was heavy with sadness. Antony's family held a separate funeral at a yacht club. There were speeches about love and a bright future, and big pictures of the pair were put up. A lot of Fee's friends thought it was all fake. It was very careful to leave out the real past, the fights and the emotional tension. Anthony and his family did not go to the funeral or the ceremony where Fee's ashes were spread. Over time, hints started to show that not everyone close to Anthony was completely happy with the official story. His sister Chrissy got involved in a big study into drugs that aren't allowed. She didn't get charged, but she did make a mysterious post on social media. The only thing that gives me hope is that the truth will come out one day. Even though the words were vague, they seemed like quiet proof to Phoebe's parents. There was evidence that not everyone in the Hampel family thought the case was over. No matter how much time went by, Antony's name would always be linked to disaster. In June 2018, 25-year-old Bailey Schneider died in a way that was too similar to what had happened years before. She was a lively young woman from Melbourne who was close to her family and friends. Not long before she died, she told someone that her relationship with Antony had broken down. She was ready to end things for good. Bailey Schneider was at home texting on her phone in the morning of June 24. Her parents had left to do some things. Their daughter was on the kitchen floor next to a closet with a cord around her neck when they got back. There was no high anchor point close, and the way things were set up looked strange. The police quickly said it was self-harm, but Bailey's family didn't believe them at first. She was about 5 feet 10 inches tall, and there were no hanging lights in the room that could have held a normal one. In the early crucial hours, the authorities did not lock or check the phones, and afterwards some data was missing. Investigators were never able to figure out how the loop could have become tighter in that area. Afterwards, separate tests showed that this kind of setup would have been very hard, if not impossible, to do by yourself without a lot of help or force. But none of that was included in the published report. They looked into it for more than a year and came to the same conclusion. The person hurt themselves. This was like a second blow to Phoebe's family. There were 2 young women who knew the same man. Both were found in strange conditions, and it was said that they had told their loved ones they were ending the relationship not long before they died. In every case, the cops only looked into the most basic ideas. Important digital evidence was lost twice, and the official finding each time was the same. The person who was hurt killed herself. In the public eye, that's how the lives of Phoebe Handzuk and Bailey Schneider got linked. Did it happen by chance, or was there something else going on? A pattern where important evidence faded too quickly and a predetermined story was accepted before all the possible explanations were fully looked into. Phoebe's dad and Bailey's family still don't have clear answers. The truth is still out of reach. They are left with unresolved sadness and the name Antony, which connects the 2 tragedies in a way that keeps making people wonder.